Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. That's the spirit, folks. That's the spirit. If there's one thing that 17 years of growing up in a psychiatric hospital has taught me, if you want to stay sane, you've got to have fun. I don't know what it was like for you, but when I was a kid, magic was so important. My life was such lunacy that things like Santa, the power of magic, that mystique in my life really kept me going. And the tooth fairy, I mean, fancy that. I was always pulling my teeth out so I could get a visit. And after watching The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, I used to sit at the back of the wardrobe praying that the magic door would open up so I could go to Narnia. So imagine my shock horror the day that I found out that Santa didn't exist. My world collapsed, and yet the signs were there. When my dad came up to me and said, look, Santa doesn't really like milk that much. He prefers a double whiskey. And I thought, my God, Santa can drink. 6 billion people to deliver for, double as well. That'd explain the red cheeks and the big stomach, wouldn't it? But the fact was, magic left my life. And I wondered, how can I get it back? How can I get magic back in my life? And that was my quest. So I spent my life finding how I could do that. And I worked as a nurse for 13 years. And 10 of those were night shifts. And I always used to do what I could to lighten the mood of the wards that I was working in. And I used to love Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve was one of my favorite nights of the year because I used to dress up as Santa. And I'd go around the wards. And what I noticed was, rather than people talking about their problems and the pain they were in, when I said Merry Christmas, they started to smile. They started to feel good. They started laughing. And patients would miraculously feel better. And this night shift, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I decided that I'd do my rounds. Now, you could have heard a pin drop in this place. And as I walked down, I got to one of the bays, a 4-bedded bay. And as a nurse, you get a sixth sense when something's not right. And I walked in and I saw that Doris, something wasn't right with Doris. Now, Doris was in with an infection. She was a little bit confused. So I walked up to Doris's bed and I started shaking Doris. I said, Doris, are you okay? Now, 9 times out of 10 when I did this, old ladies would wake up going, ah! This wasn't one of the 9 out of 10. I was shaking Doris. I was like, Doris, are you okay? And she wasn't. She wasn't breathing, no pulse. Doris was clinically dead. I ran out, put the crash call out, and I got the crash trolley. I ran round to Doris. I drew round all of the curtains, light on, airway in, oxygen on, monitor on, flatline. So I did what any self-respecting Santa would do. And I started jumping up on her chest in the CPR. Now, just imagine the surprise of the crash team when they walked in and saw Santa jumping up and down on this old lady's chest. And what this taught me was that there's always an opportunity to have fun in any situation in your life. Now, it wasn't always that way for me. I wasn't always able to instantly have fun in any situation. When I first qualified as a nurse, I'd only been qualified for 3 weeks. Now, does anyone know any nurses in here? Yeah, quite a few of you. Now, any nurses will tell you straight away that your training doesn't begin until the day you qualify because you're not accountable for anything. I'd been qualified for 3 weeks. And the hospital had this idea to save money. What they would do is bring me in an hour late. So I missed handover because there were 2 more senior nurses than me on the ward this day. So I came into this ward, a big open plan ward. It was a Nightingale-style ward with 12 beds down this side, 12 beds down this side, the nurses' station here, and the bathroom here. And I walked in, I didn't know any of the patients at all. I got a 2-minute handover saying there's no changes. Well, that meant nothing to me because I didn't know any of the patients. And then these two more qualified nurses than me, after an hour and a half, decided we're going to break together because they wanted to gossip. So all safety protocols out of the window. And there I was, after 3 weeks of being a qualified staff nurse, finding myself on this mad ward, and I was the most senior nurse there. And as the phones were ringing, relatives wanted to know what was going on with the patients. The patients wanted to go to the toilet. They were buzzing the buzzers the whole time. Doctors were demanding my attention and asking me, what about these patients? I knew nothing. There was this chaos in the middle. Porters were arriving in the ward and taking patients away, and I didn't even know where, because nobody had handed this stuff over to me. It was chaos. And in the middle of this, one of the cleaners came up to me, strolled across the ward, all the time in the world, and said, I think there's somebody in the toilet. They don't look very well. So I thought, okay, let's go and see what's going on here. So I went to the toilet, and sure enough, there's a guy looking cold, white, and very dead. Now, has anybody in here had some serious shit happen to them? I'm talking serious shit. Well, this guy had just about the most serious shit you can get. He'd had a huge rectal bleed on the toilet and died sitting there. Now, what do you do in this emergency situation? He was clearly dead, very, very dead. But the hospital had a policy. Everybody has to be resuscitated. If they're for resuscitation, you have to put out the call and you have to start resuscitation. This guy had been here so long that he had rigor mortis. He died on the toilet and been there. It takes rigor mortis 4 to 6 hours to set in. He died during the night. The night shift had missed it. The early shift had missed it. And I'd walked into the middle of this. And after an hour and a half of me being on the ward, we finally discover this dead patient on the toilet. Quickly, put out the crash call. I grabbed the other care assistant. I said, we can't resuscitate him on the toilet. We can't have this. We can't do it on the grounds of the bathroom. This would be lunacy. So I grabbed this guy by the hands and his arms. The care assistant grabbed him by his ankles, and we went across the ward. I often wondered what was going on in the other patient's mind as they saw this comedy act, double act, running across the ward with a dead body. We put him on the bed. I drew the curtains around. I got the crash trolley in. I flattened the bed. I put the airway in. I put the oxygen mask on. And sure enough, when I put the monitor on, guess what? A flat line. And I thought, oh my God, the crash team are going to arrive any minute. I can't just be standing here looking over him and saying, well, there's nothing I can do. I panicked. And when there's high emotion, there's low intelligence. And I had very, very low intelligence that day. I thought, I've got to be seen to be doing something. So I got on this guy's chest and I started giving resuscitation, except he had rigor mortis and he'd frozen in this position. So every time I pushed down on his chest, I nearly got his knee in my head. And there was this rocking thing going on. And imagine the surprise of the crash team when they walked in and saw this nurse bouncing up and down on somebody's thing with his knees going up to hit my head. Now I looked round to see the complete look of contempt on the face of the crash team, as if to think, where did they find this lunatic? I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me. And at that moment, I never wanted to be a nurse again. I was ready to quit. And what this experience taught me is that shit happens, and for some, it's worse than others. Thank you. Now, I've got a confession to make. I'm actually a lunatic. Apart from my obvious qualifications of growing up in a lunatic asylum, I went to oxforddictionaries.com and I looked up lunatic. And it said, somebody who's mentally ill. But there was a second definition. Somebody who displays extreme foolishness or eccentricity. And I thought, that's me. I'm a lunatic. Because I am a little bit foolish, and I'm definitely quite eccentric at the best of times. Whether I'm mentally ill, well, I'll let you decide on that one. But I am a lunatic. I grew up on the grounds of this lunatic asylum. My parents, when I was 7 months old, moved in the grounds of a lunatic asylum because they both worked there. So I was surrounded all my life by patients with various psychiatric illnesses. It was literally a nut house. When I went to school, because I came from the asylum, I was a nutter. So I spent my whole life trying to fit in, trying to say, no, I'm not really that bad. We can be friends, can't we? That guy's a nutter. Right? Do we want to go anywhere near him? He came from the asylum. This was everyday life for me. Everyday life. I was just another lunatic coming out of the asylum and going back every day after school. And I spent my whole life sort of doing what my parents told me to try and fit in. And when I was 16, I got a job in a restaurant. And I was working, and I loved my job. All right, I was only earning £2.30 an hour. But I loved going into work because my friends were there. My heart just filled with joy because I loved my work. Working as a grill chef in a Mexican fast food restaurant. And then I got the talk from my parents. They sat me down. They said, Adam, it's no good. You've got to get yourself a serious job. Use your head. Get a serious job. Has anyone had a serious job here? Be careful. So I got myself a job in a merchant bank, and I had to commute into London every day. And each time, I just look at the lifeless souls on the train, bustling around for not even engaging in eye contact. If I ever said hello to anyone, it was as though I really was a lunatic. We'll ignore him. And so I soon got into the routine. I thought, I better not be different here. Let's just go with the flow. I got into work. I worked with all of these people who, in the same department, who hated their jobs. And some of them had been there for 20 years. Now, the Japanese, they paid people to be efficient. What do you have to do? There's the amount of money. Phone the customer. Tell them that you've got this money. Ask which account to put it in. And that's a job done. It's an efficiency. So me phoning up and saying, how was your weekend? Didn't go down particularly well. And connecting with the people and finding out a little bit about them. That was deemed inefficient by the Japanese bank. So every time I got a pay review, I got below average. Because I wanted to connect with people. And this was a serious job, my friends. So after 2 years, I would just feel like I really was going insane. Because the people in the merchant bank were walking around lifeless. And it reminded me of the patients in the lunatic asylum. Except the patients in the lunatic asylum had been medicated. They had no choice. The people in the bank were choosing to be there and act this way. This was lunacy, and I was in the middle of it. So I thought, that's it. Enough. I'm stopped playing other people's game. I'm not going to do what other people want me to do anymore. I handed in my notice. I got a job at an American summer camp. And I went home, and I was living with my grandparents. I said, Granddad, I'm leaving the bank, and I'm going off to work in a summer camp. And they said, yeah, of course you are, Adam. 30 days later, I didn't turn up to work. Why aren't you going to work, Adam? I said, I told you I quit. I'm off to a summer camp. The tickets came through the door, and for 2 days, my entire family turned on me. Use your head, Adam. What are you doing? You're giving up this great job in a merchant bank. For what? To go and piss around in a summer camp? So I had 2 days of hell from my family. But the day I got on that plane, I decided I'm not going to be using my head anymore. I'm going to follow my heart. And I felt so good when I made that decision. Now, during my career as a nurse, I watched a lot of people die. I literally sat there for the dying moments, reflecting with people at the end of their lives, holding their hands as they told me what they regretted the most. and the things that did make them light up. And the things that made them light up were fun. When they had fun, when they were younger, when they expressed themselves in a way, when they were dancing, when they were rebellious, when they did stuff they shouldn't be doing. They lit up, telling me the tales of what they did. But when they talk about their other lives, their energy dropped. Things started to go wrong. Now, you'd think I'd known that working in an A&E and seeing people die on a daily basis. But it wasn't until I was in South Africa and I was on a thing called the Marijuana Trail on the wild coast of South Africa. Now, my nursing days had given me a penchant for this combustible inducer of altered states. So I was naturally drawn to the Marijuana Trail. And sure enough, we were on this huge vehicle, this Unimog, with wheels bigger than me. Not even any seatbelts. This thing used to go up and down all terrains. And we were on a mountain pass, driving around, big mountain road, trees, going round. We hit the corner, mountain pass, and 2 cars had decided to park either side of the road and have a conversation. But there was another car coming this way, filling in the gap. So we had 2 choices. Our driver had 2 choices. Drive over them and kill somebody, or go off the side of the mountain. And in those few seconds, I froze. And I realized this could be it. Because he made the decision to go off the side of the mountain. No seatbelts. And in that moment, I surrendered. And I thought, you know what? I'm 29. And for the last 10 years, I've followed my heart. I've traveled 6 continents. I've lived my life. I've jumped out of planes. I've bungee jumped. I've done the stuff. I did my bucket list already. And I surrendered. And as we went over the mountain, there was a serenity as we were catapulted all over the place. And it was like a scene from a NASA space training camp with bodies just flying all over the place. And we only rolled a couple of times, but when we finished, I landed without a scratch on me. When fun is your goal and you follow your heart, you get lucky. And screams and people crushed under the thing, and the people that caused the crash jumped on top to put more pressure on. But we managed to get everyone out. I managed to patch them up at the side of the road, and I managed to get a ready-rolled marijuana joint, which I thought was richly deserved at that particular point in time. And just as I was sparking it up, I realized I hadn't seen the policewoman at the side of the road who came along and swiftly arrested me. Now, I'd never been arrested before, and I've never been arrested since, but I can honestly tell you that's the one time in my life I didn't give a shit. I'm so pleased to be alive. I'm happy to follow you to the police car. So I followed them to the police car and just waited to get in. Now, the point of what all this I'm telling you, my friends, is if you haven't got fun in your life, you're missing a trick. And what I'm doing is building a fun community of fun things that are fun to be around, because fun is the missing link. I've studied personal development. I've been down the alternative route. Fun is the missing link. And I'm going to invite all of you to join me in this fun family. Because when I was standing there waiting to be arrested, the other police officer and the tour guide came along and they started talking Afrikaans. And in the end, my tour guide said, right, quick, come with me. You're all right. I said, what did you say to him to get me off? He said, oh, I just told him that you can't arrest him for smoking marijuana. They do that all the time in England. But here's the thing. The police officer said, I know, I've seen a film about that. That was what got me off. When you have fun, you get lucky. And when I got on the plane to go to America, and my heart started to sing, that started my route of following my heart and traveling 6 continents and living a life of fun and stop listening to what everyone else wanted. And the day that I went back to work after killing somebody, I was traumatized, but my friends, they helped me out. And they said, quick, Adam, come along here. We've got an emergency for you. They took me into a room, and there was a dead patient. They said, we thought you might want to try and resuscitate them before we sent them to the morgue. And I realized when you can laugh at yourself, regardless what goes on, you've got the most powerful gift that you will ever get. And as I was there on Christmas morning, resuscitating Doris. And the crash team were there. And they got out the defibrillator. Stand back. Bang! Couple of 100 volts through her body as it jumped up. And there was that moment where we waited and looked at the monitor. Beep. 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 And then I looked down at Doris. And as she lay there, suddenly, her eyes opened. And the first thing she said, as she reached out and touched me on the side of the thing, was, Santa? I put my hands back down on Doris's side of her cheek and I said, it's okay, Doris. Everything's going to be all right. Merry Christmas. And that, my friends, is the magic of fun. Thank you. Thank you.
Another round for Adam.